Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'll start off with a little bit of an introduction on myself. My name is Kaitlyn, and I'm a Girl Up Teen Advisor and a US Midwest Regional Leader. I'm a high school senior from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm super excited to be speaking with Staci today and having you all tune in for this conversation. I joined the Girl Up community platform about a year ago, and I saw a listing to join the US Midwest Regional team a few months later. And also around that time, I found out that my application to become a Girl Up Teen Advisor had been successful, and I was incredibly excited to be a part of the Girl Up family. Before then, I'd heard of Girl Up and its message through social media, through my friends, but I really had no idea that I would be entering into such a warm, passionate, and respectful community. And with Girl Up, I'm specifically interested in mental health and refugee and immigrant rights, but also just overall female empowerment, which I believe can be so inspirational and is much needed in this world. I don't currently play sports, but I did club swimming for basically all of my life until the beginning of middle school. It was something where my mom even did baby swimming lessons with me, so it's always been a pretty large part of my life since I was younger. And although I swim only recreationally now, having a background in swimming from a young age has opened me up to a lot of appreciation and respect I have for the water today that I wouldn't have otherwise. My dad, when I was growing up, always told me that he introduced me to hobbies like swimming so that I would always have something to lean on no matter what direction my life would take in the future. So with that said, I'm honored to host this conversation with Staci because of her inspirational journey to the Paralympic Games, her boldness and initiative in using her platform to amplify issues important to her, and how she merges research and her skiing experience to develop projects that she's working on, like Seeing Without Sight. And as someone who's passionate about mental health, about women's health, creating the space for girls to explore sports careers is important because it gives girls the background to learn more about leading a healthy lifestyle. And it's also so crucial in helping girls to grow leadership and teamwork skills in a collaborative community and also build a positive self-image with the help of supportive female peers and role models. Similarly, I think it's so important for girls to pursue professional athletics and sports careers so that they can find a safe space in sports. Sports can be so rewarding, and just having the opportunity to lean on a constant in one's life is important to developing personal character and leadership skills. Not only that, but the girls who continue in sports can also be part of a new generation of female sports leaders that can act as role models and train younger girls so that over generations, the structural barriers for girls in sports can be broken. So I'm so inspired by women like Staci who serve as a positive role model for young girls today. And with all of that being said, I'm excited to introduce her. Staci will be sharing her journey into sports, her experience in the Paralympics, and her advice for girls wanting to pursue sports professionally. Staci, would you please introduce yourself?
Thanks very much, Caitlin. That was a great intro. And it seems we have some similar interests, so that's awesome. I'm Stacy. I grew up in New Jersey, and I started skiing when I was about 4 years old, and so that has been a huge part of my life since I was very young. I was born legally blind, and so I think my parents didn't really know what to do with me. And they weren't sure how independent I could be. But there was an adaptive sport program at a mountain I grew up skiing at called Windham Mountain in the Catskills in upstate New York. And so I started skiing when I was 4 and haven't really stopped since. And by the time I was 12, I kind of had the Paralympics as a little bit of a goal. And I pursued competitive skiing, made the national team at a pretty young age when I was, I think, 17. And since then, I competed at 2 Paralympic Games in Sochi in 2014, and in Pyeongchang in 2018. And I was very lucky that I had sport, and I was also pursuing a undergrad degree at Dartmouth at the same time. So I finished up my degree at Dartmouth in 2019, right after the games. And As Kaitlyn mentioned, I am now a researcher and a doctoral student in counseling psychology. So I'm specifically interested in sports psychology. My research tends to look at the intersections of how athletes experience impairments, disability, sport culture, and athlete mental health. More specifically and relevant to your group, I'm really interested in how intersecting identities, so this idea of intersectionality, impacts the experiences of people with disabilities. And specifically, I tend to look at high performance sport. So one project or one thing I'm quite interested in thinking about is gender equity within the para sport movement. So I've done a few projects. I was contracted out working with the Canadian Blind Sport Association when I was doing my master's up at the University of British Columbia. So I have worked to think about gender equity and think about how we can create even more inclusive spaces in disability sport that goes beyond just thinking about ability. So that is kind of my background and how I ended up here. And I'm very excited to be talking to you, and glad that I was asked to be part of this event. So yeah.
Thank you for that introduction, Staci. I think it's so cool how you started at 4 and now it's just become such a big part of your life. So I can't wait to learn more about you, and let's get started with the first question. So as a bronze medalist in the 2017 Para Alpine Skiing World Championships and as a participant in the 2018 Paralympic Games, how did you find your passion for skiing?
Yeah. So I just kind of that was a bit of a spoiler alert on that one from me, but yeah, as I mentioned, I started skiing when I was 4, and it has always been a really big part of my life. I think for me and for my family, skiing was always something that we could do together, which was different because I have 2 older siblings and they are both fully sighted, and so I think my family had a hard time finding things that we could all stay active and spend time together. And so that's kind of where my passion for skiing started. And then through getting competitive and through, working with the national team and coming across some of the opportunities that I've had skiing, being able to travel around the world, being able to experience a lot of different places, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people. I think my passion has just grown for that over the years, and the passion for being on the mountains and the passion for the opportunities that has brought me. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful that I was given the opportunity to be a part of skiing and to learn how to ski at such a young age, because I think it really taught me not to be afraid of the mountains, and to be able to ski uninhibited and not worry about what could happen or the things that I might not be able to see. So that's kind of where my passion originated for skiing and continues to exist.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's super interesting that you grew up near a ski mountain, and it's kind of like, I guess, like a bit of a stroke of luck that like you were able to really develop a passion for the sport later. So building off of that previous question, how has your lifelong journey with skiing enabled you to become a stronger leader?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and I think that sport, in a lot of ways, you know, it creates like a profound sense of resiliency in athletes. So I think this idea that it's a very clear, like, you fall down and you have to get back up, and you have to learn that no matter how hard a lesson that I had to learn when I was competing is that no matter how hard you work, you're always going to have days where you fall. You're always going to have days where, in ski racing, for me, it was I didn't finish races, or I crashed, or I skied slower than I wanted to. And being able to learn to get back up, to keep working really hard, even when things aren't going well, and to not let your results impact your work ethic and how you feel about yourself and your sport, I think is like, it teaches people to be resilient. And I think that's such an important skill to have as a leader, is because as a leader, you're never going to be able to please everyone. So you need to be able to prioritize the things that are most important for the team that you're working towards, and you're working for. And yeah, just continue moving forward despite challenges that you will inevitably face. And so I think for me, sport taught me a lot of that and gave me a lot of skills that I continue to use in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an important thing to keep in mind when people are athletes, to just keep getting back up. Especially, I feel like in skiing, where like it's a physical sport and you actually like fall down and need to get back up. So thank you for that answer. And on that note, I'll segue into my next question about how we as a community can help more girls lead in sports. So my fellow teen advisor asked this question of Lindsay McLaren earlier during the boot camp, but I'm curious to also hear your opinion on this topic. So how can we increase opportunities for girls and women in sports? And what do you think is the biggest barrier driving the gender gap in sports?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I think the biggest barrier driving, which creates inequity, gender inequity in sport, is um, representation of women above the athlete level. So representation of women as coaches, women as staff members, women as administrators sitting within these sport organizations. Because especially when we think about Paralympic sports, I'll use as an example because I am familiar with that and I'm familiar with the research. But we see that like there is about 50-50 men to women within the Paralympic movement in terms of athletes. But when we look above athletes and we start to look at coaches and we start to look at administrators, it's like something like 90% men. And so I think for me, that's what stands out to me the most, because I think it's impossible to create inclusive spaces when there aren't, when like representation does matter. And so when there are not women sitting at the table making these decisions, I think it's very hard to create inclusivity and have that trickle down into the culture of the sport and the experience of the athletes. And so for me, that's what stands out the most. And I would love to see a shift in that in the future to kind of create more equity within sports spaces.
Yeah, I didn't think about that before. It seems like kind of like more of a behind the scenes things, because you can very like visually see the athletes at the front, whereas like on the back end, there's a lot of people working that are inspiring those athletes. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'm interested in hearing your own experience with barriers. So what were the biggest barriers you've personally faced within sports, either as an athlete and or a professional, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially as a person with a disability, it can become challenging because oftentimes people make assumptions about you before they even know anything about you. And I think I've seen that both in my athletic endeavors and also within my professional career. And so I think for me, I would tell others to not take no for an answer, to recognize that there will always be people in your life who are not as supportive and who will question whether or not you are capable of doing something or capable of achieving the goals that you set out for yourself. And I definitely had those people in my life as well. But I think learning to be confident and to set lofty goals and to not take no for an answer and to find the resources that you need, even if that isn't the first person that you encounter, I think is probably the best advice I could give for young women who are coming into sport.
Yeah, and finding these resources requires like some confidence. So how might we help girls have more confidence in like their sports abilities and just in general, like pursuing sports opportunities? And what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your sports journey?
Yeah, I guess to my younger self, I would say, and I guess to others as well, I would say to be bold. I always tell people, even at my, even now as a doctoral student, I always tell people, like, what is the worst that can happen when you send that email to that person? A lot of people, I think they get so nervous to get rejected that they don't even, throw their name in the hat or send the email to that person who is very scary, or that coach who you don't think would ever give you the time of day. And so I'm always err on the side of send the email, and know that sometimes you will be rejected, and just know that, and know that that sucks. And but it's not something that you will not be able to overcome. And then you will find opportunities. Opportunities will come your way that you maybe didn't expect, just by asking, and being open and reaching out to people who you think could be of help. So I think that would probably be my advice to my younger self and to others is, be bold and make those connections, and make that network of people who are going to support you even when others might not.
Yeah, thanks for that really great advice. I know personally, like I've always felt scared writing a cold email, so it's definitely the kind of thing where you just need to be bold and go for it. So
Yeah, definitely. You never know who will answer.
yeah, for sure. I know. Just as a funny anecdote, one of my friends like Instagram DM'd, I think Serena Williams' tennis coach, and then he actually responded. So
See,
yeah.
you
So
never know.
yeah. Thank you. Your passion is so motivating. And I feel like throughout this conversation, I've gained a really neat insight into your perspective as a professional female athlete. So I will be taking a couple of questions from the audience now. So are there any additional questions? I can also read aloud any questions that are dropped in the chat. Okay. I got a question in the chat. What was your favorite ski race you ever participated in?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I get a lot of people that ask me what my favorite place to ski is, and I can never come up with one. So I'm excited to have a different one. Like, what is my favorite event that I've skied? Um, it's kind of cliche, but when I was skiing at the 2017 World Championships, it was in Italy. And it was a really fun mountain, and I did pretty well there. So I would say that was probably my favorite. Also, not just because I skied well, I think because I skied well despite a lot of challenges, and I wasn't expected to ski very well, if that makes sense. So I ended up winning a bronze medal in an event called the Super Combined, and it's two runs, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, in two different events. And so the morning run, I actually didn't ski very well at all, and I was feeling really frustrated and annoyed with myself. And I basically was just like, oh, well, it doesn't even matter because I'm not gonna like my first run was so bad. But I skied quite a fast second run, so I ended up on the podium that day, and I think that probably was my favorite just because it was so unexpected. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we're almost at time, so I think that's all the questions we have for today. So thank you, and I'll end on a closing note by leaving us all with these two statistics from the Women's Sports Foundation. So these statistics say that girls have 1.3 million fewer opportunities to play high school sports than boys have, and also that girls are 2 times more likely than boys to drop out by the age of 14. So I just thought these were really interesting when I was researching girls in sports, because it really puts into perspective how important it is to have role models like Staci here with us today, who are encouraging, empowering, and amplifying the need for girls in sports. So I encourage you all to look within your own communities and in Girl Up and Girl Up clubs to find ways that you can support girls in sports. And if you personally are a girl in sports yourself, to keep pursuing the sport if it's something that you enjoy. So thank you so much to Staci. I've learned so much from this conversation, and I hope you all today have as well. And we hope we can have you speak at Girl Up events in the future. Thank you.
Of course, thanks for having me.